U.S. President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden have faced off in their final presidential debate less than 2 weeks ahead of Election Day. They traded barbs over a host of issues, including the COVID-19 pandemic.
I say we're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does. He has the ability to lock himself up. I don't know. He's obviously made a lot of money someplace, but he has this thing about living in a basement. People can't do that.
This is the same fellow who told you this is going to end by Easter last time. This is the same fellow who told you that, don't worry, we're going to end this by the summer. We're about to go into a dark winter, and he has no clear plan.
I want to talk broadly about
Trump defended his response to the pandemic, saying shutting down the country would deal a blow to the economy. He and his rival also clashed on climate change and environment. They also traded barbs over immigration. Biden was critical of Trump's measures to separate a large number of children from their families at U.S. borders. The president responded by saying that those kids were brought to the U.S. by what he called bad people. Trump also repeatedly defended his stance on the issue of race, calling himself the least racist person in the room.
I think I have great relationships with all people. I am the least racist person in this room.
Here is one of the most racist presidents we've had in modern history. He pours fuel on every single racist fire, every single one. Started off his campaign coming down the escalator saying he's going to get rid of those Mexican rapists. He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims.
The two also leveled accusations at one another about their approach towards foreign policy and their personal dealings with foreign nations. Healthcare was also another topic that Biden and Trump discussed. The U.S. president said his administration would come up with a brand new health plan. Biden, in return, defended Obamacare, stressing that healthcare is not an advantage but a right for all people. Both candidates concluded their last televised debate with contrasting views. Trump said it would be a sad day for the U.S. if Biden gets elected. Biden said his election would be a return to decency, honor, and respect. All right, I'm going to be discussing parts of that debate with Mr. Max Parry. He's an investigative journalist who joins us via Skype out of New York. Max, I'm pretty sure that you listened to the debate yourself. Before asking you how different do you think this was in contrast with the last one, it's interesting that, everything began with the speak of coronavirus. And, it's for a good reason. It is no surprise. How do you think the president managed to basically answer Mr. Biden's accusations regarding the coronavirus and how it should have been done?
Well, I think in the debate tonight, there's no question he was a lot more disciplined in his performance. And, his performance in the first debate was just so over the top. And I believe he had interrupted Biden more than 150 times. So this time he was much more measured and disciplined in how he conducted himself. However, prior to the pandemic, I was of the opinion, actually, that following his acquittal by the Senate in his impeachment trial, that Trump was slated for re-election, really. But ever since March, he's really just been self-destructing and continuously shooting himself in the foot, starting with what has been widely perceived as his completely incompetent mishandling of the pandemic, where he sat on his hands for 3 months while the virus was raging in China, and 7 months later, there's now over 200,000 deaths. And the subsequent economic destruction, he's been the recipient of much of the blame and for the poor federal response, and for good reason. I would say that in this debate tonight, he did do a much better job in terms of contrasting Biden's rhetoric with his actual record, and emphasizing some of the things that did get him elected in the first place, as far as his ill-fated effort to bring U.S. manufacturing jobs back to the United States, and some of his relatively less hawkish rhetoric on foreign policy, as far as North Korea goes, for example. So I would say he did a better job in this particular debate. But really,
Max, before you move on, if you say that he did a better job than the last one, at least in terms of how many times he interrupted the former vice president, I totally agree with you. But do you really think that is going to be enough come November the 3rd, that it will basically compensate this 9-point advantage that Mr. Biden holds over him right now?
Well, it's very difficult to say because a lot of these polls, if you remember the last election, they were very similar in projecting a lead for Hillary Clinton. So I'm not so sure that they're reliable. However, I will say that his completely incompetent mishandling of the pandemic, which seemingly everybody acknowledges, has made this much more of a toss-up than it would have been if you'd asked me the same question, say, in February.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just move on to another issue. Of course, something that stood out in the middle of the discussion. There were two sentences that I picked out. I want to discuss them with you as well. Mr. Biden describing America as systematically racist. What do you think is going to be the fallout of that?
Well, this year in particular, in the wake of the mass demonstrations we saw following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota, an unarmed African-American man at the hands of a white police officer, it's an essential topic of political discourse. But, I don't think there could be two more poorly qualified people to be on the debate stage for that topic. Again, Mr. Trump's rhetoric is inflammatory and explicitly racist, you could say. But on the other hand, his opponent might be espousing some progressive rhetoric. But if you look at his own record, which Mr. Trump did bring up, specifically the 1994 crime bill, which was greatly skyrocketed the U.S. prison population, which disproportionately impacted Black Americans. Neither of them is qualified or prepared to deal with an issue that it really is so systemically ingrained in U.S. politics.
Max, let me tell you that towards the end, I'm pretty sure that you also remember, toward the end, when there was talk of climate change and preserving energies and finding new sources of energy, Mr. Trump said that the country is now free of energy needs because of the policies that he has taken mainly. And of course, he mentioned something that was very, very interesting, and it's the first time to my memory that a U.S. president admits to the fact that the U.S. has gone to wars before with countries whose energies the U.S. needs, and these are the president's words. My God, very, very important. I mean, admitting this finally. What do you think is going to be the fallout of that? And of course, the U.S. standings in the eyes of the world, that everywhere they went, at least they claimed that they were going there, I don't know, to erect things like democracy or free people from their bad leaders and so on and so forth.
Well, I've said this before. One of the things about Trump, the fact that his statements are so wildly unpredictable, sometimes he will make, most of the time he's making, blatant falsehoods. But every once in a while he'll make a statement that is very, very true and that no measured U.S. politician would ever state, which is something like that that U.S. expansionism and wars have been over acquiring the resources of other nations. I think it takes someone who is undisciplined as Mr. Trump for a statement like that to be made. And I think that's one of the reasons why the sort of military establishment sees him as an insufficient steward of empire, because he does make statements like that. And, he's done that before, where he said we're going to keep the oil, as a reference to the U.S. troops occupying northern Syria, for example. So it was an incredible statement, but really it's not the first time he's made such statements before.
Yeah, one thing that nobody can understand, why is it that he's destroying the building that he's standing on? Max Parry, investigative journalist out of New York via Skype. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks for your time.